All right, folks, welcome. We'll get started in just a second. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sutton Stokes, Associate Director of the West Virginia Center for Civic Life. I hope everyone was able to connect with no problems, although I'm sure there were one or two glitches. Today, we're going to be talking about, obviously, facilitating community discussions. So just a technical note, this presentation does include spoken narration. You should be hearing my voice right now, although of course if you're not, it's not doing any good for me to say that. If you can hear me but the audio isn't great, you can always dial in using the phone number and PIN number from your registration email. You can also see that information on your control panel if you switch from computer audio to phone call. In case you're wondering, you're all muted, and we're going to leave it that way just to keep things manageable, and we'll talk about how to cover how to ask questions in just a second. Today's agenda, after I introduce today's presenters, they will lead us through presentations on the importance of community discussions, the vital role of the people facilitating those discussions, the types of discussion processes, and the different situations where those work best. We'll have a dedicated question and answer segment at the very end, but as we go along, please feel free to enter any questions that occur to you at any time. The way you ask questions is shown on this slide. You should see a little box on your control panel labeled Type Question Here. If you do think of a question, just enter it there. We'll try to answer as many as we can, but just be aware that for technical reasons, we can't respond necessarily immediately while one presenter is actively switching slides. So we'll do our best to catch up before we finish, but if we don't get to yours by the end, we will follow up by email after the webinar is over. Today's presenters are all staff of the West Virginia Center for Civic Life. Jean Ambrose is our program coordinator. Betty Knighton is our executive director, and as I mentioned, I'm Sutton Stokes, associate director. Now, before I give the floor to Betty, we are going to publish a little poll, and this just has one question, and we wanted to get everyone's to answer this as quick as you can. Just we get a sense of the experience level in the room with facilitation or moderation. We just thought it would be a good idea to get a sense of that. So just take a second and look at this, choose an answer, and we'll give that just a few more seconds. Let's see, 83% of you have voted so far, and that's climbing. So it looks like we'll be done in just a few more seconds. And as soon as I close it, GoToWebinar promises that I can share it so everyone will be able to see just how many people are in each category. We won't be able to see what you yourself answered. So I see 93%. I'm going to give it about 5 more seconds, and then I'll close the poll. All right. Okay, and it looks like everyone can see that. We have 18% have never done it before, never done facilitating before. 43% have gotten started but are still early in their career as a facilitator. 29% are mid-career, looking for further skill strengthening, and 11% are old hands. And fortunately, 0 of you think you could be teaching this webinar, although I bet that might not be true. Many moderators are modest. But anyway, we are glad to see a good range there, and we hope we can provide some interesting material for everyone. Now, I'm just going to do a little technological housekeeping on my screen. before I hand it over to Betty, our first presenter. Betty, I'll give you your slide here, and then I'm going to give you control, and that should be the case now. Take it away, Betty.
Now I'm not seeing the slide yet, Sutton, but I can say a few things while I'm waiting for that to come up. I don't have the slide. I'm still looking at the poll results.
Ah,
Uh, There we go. Thank you. One thing that you all should know is that the West Virginia Center for Civic Life has a tiny staff, but we definitely spread out across the state. And part of the way that we're helped to do that is that we all live in different places. I'm here in Charleston. Sutton is working in his office in Elkins, and Jean is in Wood County. So we're in 3 different locations, and with all the rest of you, that makes up a lot of different locations that we're coming together. So I'm grateful we have this kind of technology to connect us. I want to switch from what experience level you have to talking about the context in which you can put your experience to good use to serve the communities in which you live in West Virginia. Whether you are just starting out or whether you're an old hand at facilitating or leading community discussions, you're going to play a vital role in the life of your community. And we want to help you to put that into context. The biggest possible context we could come up with is, what does it take to make democracy work? Because the kind of work that you all are interested in and the kind of work that we're going to be talking about today are part of the larger fabric of democracy. A lot of research, and certainly our work over about 20 years here in West Virginia, has shown us that when democracy is working well, it's because citizens have an opportunity to make decisions about their future together, that institutions have a way to strengthen the work of citizens in communities, and that there are practices in communities that allow people to come together and talk and do work together. Most of those things don't just happen spontaneously. There has to be some kind of plan, some kind of practice, some kind of habits that communities adopt in order to work together on common issues of concern. And that's where facilitating plays such a vital role. And so that's why I'm so thrilled that so many of you are on here to try to explore ways to be of service in your communities. Okay. So a lot of times people say, why talk? Now, I'm assuming that because you all were interested enough to sign up for a webinar on facilitating, you probably already have a deep-seated belief that talking is important. But there are a lot of people that the case has to be made why it's even important to talk to one another, and what difference can it possibly make. Think about your own community, about some of the reasons why people might come together to talk about some issue of common concern. Maybe they want to learn more about a particular issue or upcoming event or practice that's happening in the community. Maybe they want to build connections, people to people, organization to organization. Maybe they're trying to knit together some kind of infrastructure for the community to work together. Maybe they want to understand other viewpoints, or maybe they're just really interested in setting directions for acting on an issue or a set of issues that are challenges for the community. Most likely, it's all of the above, that communities are interested in having dialogue for all of those reasons. The most dynamic communities are ones that have practices where you see that this kind of interconnected circular process is ongoing. Not that people come together just one time to talk and think that things can be settled that quickly, not that people only make decisions but without the talking and the listening that it requires, but that all of these things are at play in a community over time. Sometimes in more formal settings, like a public dialogue that's been announced to the community, sometimes much less formally, on parking lots and in organizational meetings and in your backyard and in the groups that you are in with your friends. And so, but still, these are the components that are part of communities that seem to be the most dynamic and are the most proactive in setting the kind of directions they want for their communities. Now, think about how productive dialogue could affect positive impacts on a whole range of issues that could be occurring in your communities at any given time. I'm assuming that most of you are from West Virginia, although I know some are from outside of the state. So we're really talking about a whole range of communities, some rural, some urban, a lot of different issues that would be going on in these communities simultaneously. So think about the kinds of issues that are impacting your community and the ones where you think there's a need for communities to come together and talk. Maybe they already are, and you think they need more discussion about particular issues. Maybe some issues are particularly difficult or sticky to address. What we'd like you to do, and we'll be using this information a little bit later in the webinar, we'd like for you to go over to that block that Sutton pointed out earlier, the question block. And we're not really asking you to type in a question, we're asking you to type in a phrase or some kind of a brief statement letting us know what issues you think people in your community need to talk about. Or maybe the ones they're talking about right now, the compelling issues that are kind of on the front burner in your community, or that you wish were on the front burner in your community. We'll come back to this a bit later and think about the kinds of processes that can be used or that are being used in West Virginia to address some of these issues. So take a few minutes to type in a few words there, and I'll pause for a moment, but then I'll go on while you're still doing that. Okay, Sutton's going to be looking over your responses as you type them in there, and kind of giving us a kind of a snapshot of what you're saying later in the webinar. But what I'd like to say now is, and this is a famous expression that we've heard actually from several different people, well-known people in our history, the idea that you begin with the end in mind. And that applies to so many things in life. But it really is helpful to think about this whenever you're thinking about planning some kind of a community discussion, especially if you're the person that's going to be in charge of facilitating that discussion. There's not one way of doing this kind of practice. It has to depend on so many factors that are in your community. But the first question you want to ask yourself is, what is the purpose? What is the reason that we're coming together to talk? And then you put that in the context of how much people have already been talking about the issue, how new they are to it. And as you do that, you want to prepare. And some of the things that you'll be looking at is what kind of background information do you think it's necessary to bring into a community discussion? Doesn't mean that you're necessarily the one that's in charge of preparing all this if you're the facilitator, but it's really important to think, are there some key facts? Is there some strategic information? Is there some kind of a framework for talking that you want to bring into a discussion? We'll show you some of these things later in the webinar that other communities have put together. But just thinking about whether or not people need to bring any background information in, and if so, how will that be collected, and how will you have that at your fingertips as facilitator in the discussion? You're also going to wonder, are you going to prepare anything for the participants to have in their hands, or to put up in front of the group, so that there's some kind of a common foundational practice? It might be an agenda for a conversation. It might be a set of questions. Later in the webinar, we're going to show you some really simply, but I think elegantly designed sets of questions that people around West Virginia have put together to be very proactive in talking about various issues in their community. We'll share those with you, and you can use them in your own community if they work for you. But that's important to put some planning into ahead of time. Will you have a co-facilitator? Will you be running the whole show yourself, so to speak, or there will be times where you'll trade off, or even side by side facilitate a forum with somebody else? There'll be all kinds of factors that you'll want to consider when you make that choice. One might have to do with your experience level. Another might be, how well you would work in sync with another person. And if you're going to co-facilitate, you'll have to decide, will you be doing that side by side, or will you be going kind of a tag team approach to co-facilitating? Do you want to keep some kind of written record of the discussion? What kind of notes, in other words, do you want to take, so that you'll have a historical record, or that you'll be able to use for other purposes? Jean's going to talk a little later about some of the purposes and practices of note-taking and that facilitators can benefit from. And then this looks like a mundane, kind of pedantic question. How will you allot the available time? But I have to say, after many years of doing some community facilitation in various places here in West Virginia, or other places as well, this to me is one of the greatest challenges, because happily, and actually in an encouraging light, people have a lot to say about issues that affect the quality of life in their communities, and of issues that are impacting the lives of others. And there's very infrequently enough time to talk about all the things that people would like to talk about. And so you're going to have to, as the facilitator, figure out a way to manage time so that the conversation can be productive, so that many people get to participate, but that you can also reach some of the purposes and goals that you have for the entire conversation. Now, there's one thing that we're not going to say much about today, but we don't want it to be left out because it's such an important thing for you to know. And you probably already assumed that the work of facilitating a community discussion is based on the outreach that occurs prior to the discussion to get people into the room. It's really that work of outreach to diverse segments of your community that is going to have a profound impact on the kind of discussion that you're able to facilitate when they do come together. There's a lot that we could say about outreach. Maybe that'll be the subject for another discussion in the future, but I want to make sure that you're aware that when we're talking about facilitating, we're talking about the work that you do once people have come together in the room, but of course it's based on the work that is done by you or others ahead of time. Now, some of the discussions that you might facilitate might be in a given with a given set of people that for some reason you might need to be talking to people that are already coming together for another purpose, in which case the outreach wouldn't be the integral part of it, but certainly in most cases it is. So we've talked about facilitators. That hopefully will be you in the future to continue some of the habits or build new ones that you have. But I don't want to leave out a reference to participants. I know when I first started doing some work with facilitating in West Virginia, I thought that most of the responsibility was on my shoulders. I felt that I had to be informed and that I had to be keeping track of time and that I had to be asking the right questions and that I had to be kind of responsible for the success of the discussion. But I learned pretty quickly that it's really a very, very much a shared responsibility. And so I quickly began to say at the beginning of discussions when I was in opening remarks that very thing, that it's a shared discussion, that the participants share the responsibility for listening and learning from each other. It's not all up to you as the facilitator. You're already helping the community in a great way by bringing your talents into the discussion. The participants need to do that as well. And then, of course, we mentioned recorders. You need people, a person or people who will capture some of the key themes and ideas so that you can use that information for your own future work and that you can share it with other people. Now, this slide is kind of generalizing. There are no two community discussions that would look exactly the same, and so we hope that with this information as well as all of the information that we're sharing in this webinar today, you'll adapt and be flexible with any concepts that are useful to you and apply them in your own community to the way that you think would work best for the issues and the people that you're dealing with. But in a very general way, we can say that most community discussions will begin with a basic, welcome and introductions, pretty standard in any kind of public gathering. One thing that is a little bit more unique, I think, to public conversations about issues is that often there are guidelines that are shared or even developed by the group at the beginning of the conversation so that people will have a sense of what kinds of practices they can keep in mind as they move forward in their conversation. We're going to show you some sample guidelines here in just a moment as well. The personal stake is just really asking people at the beginning of a discussion, what is it that they care about? Why are they there? What is the personal connection they have to the issue? Most times community discussions are completely voluntary. People have many, many other things they could be doing with their time. That's true within organizations as well. There's always demands on our time. There are always demands on our time. And so when people show up for a conversation, there's usually a compelling reason that they have that they care about an issue. And if you can, from the very beginning of the conversation, ask people, why do you care? Why are you here? Why does this matter to you? Instead of just assuming that everybody has the same relation to the issue. People have different relationships with these issues, and it's important for them to have a chance to kind of knit together a broad picture of that for the whole group. You'd want to talk about what you think the common purpose is. Maybe you want to agree upon what that purpose is with the group that you're with. And then discussion of the key issues at hand. I know these uniform bullet points make it look like that's just one of 8 different steps, but really that's the heart of why you're there. The discussion of the key issues is the main part of any time that you're going to be spending together with your community members. But these other parts are what make that, I think, flow smoothly. Um, Most community discussions end with a period of reflection, time to think back over what we've learned, what we've thought, what else we'd like to do, what our next steps might be. We'll show you in the webinar a little later some examples of the kinds of questions that facilitators find very effective at this point. I will say from my own experience, to kind of that I have to really remind myself how important this step is, because I've seen it be pivotal in conversation after conversation, and yet it's really easy to get caught up in talking about the issue, and then you look at your watch and it's time to go, and you haven't really set aside time for reflection. So it's just important, I think, to kind of develop the habit of making sure that you say at the beginning and then follow through with leaving time at the end of the conversation for this. And then, of course, people usually want to know what next steps there might be. If there's going to be another conversation, if something else is going to happen in the future, if this information is going to be carried somewhere else, what might those next steps be? I mentioned the sample guidelines. These are some that we have used in discussions around the state. I've seen them used well many other places, but they don't. It's not an exhaustive list. You may find different guidelines work for your group, or that there is different language that would be more appropriate for your group. But the basic idea as a facilitator is that you would share these basic concepts, that everybody's encouraged to participate and to listen. That you're going to try to facilitate a conversation in which all viewpoints are considered fairly and respectfully. That may be just a matter of course to your thinking, but some people who show up for discussion aren't quite sure whether or not they're going to be able to trust that it will be a civil, safe, constructive place for them to be and to talk. And so I think the more that you can say at the beginning to let people know that that's going to be the case is important. That you're going to examine costs and consequences of potential actions, that you will remain neutral, you'll ask probing questions and keep track of time, and then any other guidelines that the group agrees upon. Now, my colleague Jean is an extremely experienced facilitator and somebody I learn from every time I'm in the room with her when she does this kind of work. And so I'm really glad that she's with us to talk more about the role of the facilitator.
Thanks, Betty. Hi, everybody. As Betty has said, facilitation begins before the discussion with the way people have been invited to the discussion, the way they're greeted when they come into the room, the fact that they're on a list and have a name tag, and that there are refreshments. But you're the key role model who is going to set this welcoming, non-judgmental tone for the conversations. People are going to be looking to you throughout for how to respond. You will need to be an active listener, fully concentrating on what is being said. Remaining neutral is the key requirement for a facilitator, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. Asking probing questions develops mutual understanding, and it also moves the conversation forward. Managing time is, along with neutrality, a key role that you must play. Betty has already mentioned it, and we're going to keep mentioning it because it's one of your most important roles. There's nothing worse than running out of time and leaving people with a sense of unfinished business. And that also goes along with leaving the time to work toward next steps, to define them, so that people will leave a conversation with leave the conversation with a sense that the conversation has gone somewhere. Okay. Now, what does it mean to be neutral? It's really hard to overemphasize this point. We all know that we're not neutral people. We have a lot of different viewpoints in our personal views. But in your role as facilitator, it is important to the group that you behave neutrally. This slide shows some of the elements of that kind of neutral behavior. You would not indicate by your words or body language that you either agree or disagree with participants. And sometimes we're not too keyed into our own body language, but I know for myself, I'm a person who nods to people. And to me, all it means is I hear you, but actually a nod can also be interpreted as I agree with you. And so it's really hard for me to just stay still during a conversation where I'm facilitating, but it's important. You should avoid using your own personal experiences because they're going to demonstrate your biases. They also they take up time, and the conversation is really about the participants and their experiences and wisdom. It's not about you. You show your neutrality, you demonstrate your neutrality by encouraging this discussion of differing points of view in a respectful way and asking for viewpoints held by others outside of the group. The way you will move the conversation forward is through questions. I can't overemphasize the need to be prepared ahead of time so that you'll have an arsenal of questions in your pocket, so to speak, depending on where the conversations go. Here on the slide, we show some examples of questions that serve a variety of purposes. And when I go into a dialogue, I've got 3x5 cards in my hand with different kinds of questions on there that I can pull up when I feel the need. We've also got in our handout section a sheet on asking powerful questions that are we share with you. As I said, having it written down in an easy form is useful for me because I don't remember things so well anymore. Okay. This slide, I need to go back here. Clicked it twice. I'm going in the wrong direction. Don't need to be meaning to do that. Sutton, I've lost my, yeah, okay, I just lost my arrows. There we go, thanks. Questions to go deeper are especially critical when you have a group that isn't too diverse and can seem to be in general agreement. And this makes not only for a boring conversation, it's also a superficial one. So your role is really to dig under the familiar opinions and ideas. You can see when you look at these questions like how might that idea affect other people? Why would someone disagree? These are not questions that have quick answers. And usually when asked, when you pose these to people, there will be silence at first. And that's one thing that many people who are leading a group have a problem with. You may feel as though if somebody doesn't immediately respond, that you need to come up with another question. And so you can end up piling up a whole series of these deep questions that end up confusing people at the end. So silence is very powerful. And when you ask a question like that, as a facilitator, it's really great to let people ponder for a while. Facilitating to me is kind of like, whitewater rafting in the sense that it's really exhilarating in the way that you don't know what the next person is going to say that may take the whole conversation in an entirely different direction. Or someone will tell a story that really opens up people's hearts. This slide shows tried and true strategies that you as a facilitator will use again and again as part of your toolkit of facilitation techniques. These are strategies that you're going to use on the fly. You're going to come up with them as you go along while you're really listening hard. For instance, you're going to be listening for follow-up questions to clarify a statement someone made or to dig deeper. You may want to ask for reactions from others when you know there is probably disagreement in the group. I sometimes use a reaction question, just generally, what do other people think about that statement, when something factually incorrect has been said, to see if someone in the room might correct it. Transition questions make sure that you aren't missing all parts of the issue. So a question like, does anyone have anything different to add before we move on to the next point, is an example that would help you move to the next area that you want to cover. And summarizing is sometimes called paraphrasing, and probably should be done sparingly. You've probably all been in meetings where the leader paraphrased everything someone said by saying, what I hear you saying is, and then not restating it too differently. Especially if you get into that at the beginning, you may feel as though you have to do that for everybody. And so it's probably good to use that technique sparingly. Now, if the purpose of your conversations is to really make decisions in your community or identify new directions for future work, you're going to come up on what some people have called the groan zone. And this is a really important concept here to me in this slide. You know how we always say we want to think outside the box, but we, in reality, ignore that outside the box really has no rules. It's messy, people are inarticulate, and people are groping with new ways to put the pieces together. People are much more familiar with either or dichotomies, but when you gather a diverse group of people with differing perspectives, you're really in uncharted territory. This is part of that whitewater rafting going down the rapids analogy here. And so it's really important for you as the facilitator to recognize when people are in the groan zone. They'll may be confused about coming up on new ideas that don't fit their preconceptions. They're likely to go off on tangents, but sometimes the tangents really are going to have the meat of what that new direction is going to be. They'll have trouble explaining themselves because ideas are new and they're just kind of groping for new concepts. So a facilitator really helps people, is really critical to people get through the groan zone by being patient, by letting ideas emerge, by helping other people in the room be patient with each other, and continually modeling that neutral, respectful behavior, letting people know it's okay to be frustrated and confused, because what it really means is that they really are in the struggle to synthesize new ideas. This concept in this graphic comes from Sam Kainer and the Facilitator's Guide to Participatory Decision Making, which is really a real key reference for me. The groan zone is one of those real areas of challenge for facilitation, but when people are asked about what concerns them most about being facilitators, usually they are worried about this or this. These are the faces of people who are frustrated about not being heard. We've talked a lot about the preparation you and other members of like a conversation steering committee would do to create an environment where people have ample opportunity to speak their minds. I think I can speak for Betty in that in all the years, it's decades really, that we've been doing this, we've had many emotional moments, but nothing like these pictures of angry people. Usually the most powerful moments in a dialogue actually are when strong emotions are being expressed, because when people speak from the heart, everybody really feels the truth of it in their hearts. So engaging people's emotions and their deepest values is really an important part of any dialogue. And the challenges are more likely to be like this. that someone is dominating a conversation, for instance. And, you know, here we've got several suggestions for what to do about that. That you ask if other people who have not had a chance to speak have things to say. You ask for, are there other ideas that have not been expressed? You stop making eye contact with the person. You angle your body away somewhat. You may actually have them in back of you if you don't want to notice them anymore. And by having the guidelines that are reviewed at the beginning, you've set an expectation that no one person is going to dominate. Another challenge can be if strong disagreements are expressed. And here your neutrality is an essential tool in carefully listening to people, stressing the importance of understanding the different perspectives, keeping the focus on the ideas and not any of the personalities that might be involved, and really naming what the areas of disagreement are in a respectful way. There may be shared goals that neither side recognizes that you can help them understand, but in the end, you're just really helping name things in an accurate way that people agree that you do have it, and then putting it out there without judgment. In our conversations, it's typically 90 minutes or so, maybe a little longer, and it's well nigh impossible that in 90 minutes of polite conversation, the problems that are discussed will have been solved. And so that's why these closing reflections are so critically important part of the conversation and of your job as a facilitator. These are questions on this slide that we typically use to harvest the meaning from the discussion, no matter what stage you are in discussing the issue. And it's important to say at the end of people sharing their ideas and all, that now we're going to close that part of the conversation and we're going to move to reflecting on what we've heard and learned. And it's hard for people to do. They're going to want to keep talking about the issues and you'll need to stop them continually probably at this point. But what you want them to do is think over what they heard and ask, what new insights did you gain? Did you hear anything that surprised you? Did your thinking change, and in what way? What were our areas of concern? What were the areas of agreement? What do we still need to work on? Where were the tensions that were revealed? And this is really the place where you will be continually amazed as a facilitator. This is one of the, the rewards of this work, is the insightful thinking and comments that are made by the participants at this stage are really what the conversation is all about, and the meaning that people will draw from the same conversation that I heard, and that they will have come up with often many profound thoughts about what the conversation meant and what it meant to people. So you absolutely have to leave enough time for this, and why your timekeeping is so important. I would close a discussion at least definitely 20 minutes before your posted end of the meeting, so that you have enough time. Because if you miss this step, people are going to leave feeling very dissatisfied. Now, I just want to say a couple of things about capturing ideas from the community discussions. You could see in that last picture somebody flip charting. The purpose of recording is to serve as a reminder to the participants of the ideas, the questions, what people agreed on, what the tensions were, action ideas, and to use that as a reference for both future discussions and future work. And then to also, the notes can inform a wider audience of people who weren't there about what happened. We like to use two kinds of recording. One, a group recorder, and that's what you'd say is a flip chart recorder, who uses, we're all familiar with this, uses brief phrases, doesn't try to capture every word, tries to kind of capture the tensions and trade-offs, and it's somebody that can write clearly and legibly. Oftentimes people will use differing colors for this in order to make it clear for people. But we also recommend an at-the-seat recorder, someone who would capture direct quotes that reveal the spirit, the deeper concerns and emotions that people have around this issue. And they would also keep track of stories that emerge that are told that really illustrate for people what's at stake. These notes are just fabulous for reports, for press releases, for really being able to personalize what's at stake. And I've been talking for a while here. I think it's time for your questions, and so I'm going to turn this back over to Sutton.
Thanks, Jean, and thanks, Betty. Really interesting. Yeah, we did collect the list of community concerns, and we're going to talk about a couple of those with the next slide. But little glitch on the line there. But right now, does anyone have any questions that they want to ask about the material that's being presented? And if so, just go ahead. And we do have one question. Aaron. I believe this was back when Betty was presenting. She says, "Can you say more about the cost and consequences bullet?"
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of times when we are starting to talk about an issue, we think about what the ideal might be, what we'd really like to see happen, but we haven't necessarily had the opportunity to think through how that might impact other people. Sometimes there are unintended consequences of particular actions that we hadn't even had the opportunity to think about until we were in a room with other people that were thinking about it in a somewhat or maybe extremely different way. And so as a facilitator, I would often say, well, what might be the downsides of that approach to what you'd like to do? Or what would you be willing, or what might our community have to give up in order to go in that direction? Are there certain trade-offs that we would make? To go in that direction, would we maybe have less of this? Or it really helps the community to prioritize and to kind of logically follow through with what the impacts of that action might be beyond what the kind of initial thought might be. Sometimes we're kind of wishful in our thinking, but these kinds of, and that's good to be hopeful and imaginative, but you can also be practical by being asked questions about the trade-offs, the costs, the impacts that it might have, that you might have to live with in order to be able to have more of the thing that you think is good for your community.
Thanks, Betty. Jessa was also wondering, how long should a meeting last?
It really depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish, and there's so many factors. I would say that usually when we have discussions, like community discussions, let's say in the evening, they usually run something like 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And that has something to do with the time that people have available in the evening, but it also has the something to do with how much time people want to kind of sit still in their chair. I can say that I have been to discussions with on some Native American reservations that lasted the entire day, because the practice of talking and communing in that way is very much part of that culture. So it just depends on what you think is suitable for your community. I also want to stress, though, while we've been saying the discussion many times, most of the issues that communities need to talk about that rise to the level of being of community concern are going to take more than one conversation. So I often think about discussions in terms of a series of conversations that might begin with a single conversation and then see where do we need to go from here. Maybe you need to break up in smaller groups. Maybe you need to bring more people in. So think in very flexible language about that. Sometimes we've had brown bag discussions at lunchtime, which means that people have about 45 minutes because they have to get from where they work to, or where they are, to a lunchtime location, and then get back to work again. And so usually when we have those kinds of discussions, we might have them once a week for a period of a few weeks, so that you're building up more time, but you're not doing it in the same lengthy installments each time.
Thanks, Betty. And I'll just say, I think we right now have to make a choice between answering. There's about 4 more really good questions that I see there, but we may really run over if we do that. Of course, there's always the option to answer them by email, and we can send those answers out to everyone. What do you think?
And I would suggest go ahead and pick at least a couple more questions. I can
Okay.
reduce the examples that I was going to give later because we have some downloads for people on that.
Alrighty. Let's see. There was a question about using actual recording devices instead of an at-the-seat recorder from Ian.
We've done that before. Of course, you need to have usually you need the permission of not usually, I'd say you definitely would want to get the permission of the group to do that. And you might think about, why do you want to have a verbatim recording of a discussion? In most cases, you might not need to go back and listen to the entire discussion again. You might need to just make sure that you have some interesting quotes or stories that emerge from the discussion in any kind of reporting to the public or others that you would want to use. Now, fortunately, we've been in a situation a few times where we work with public broadcasting or other folks who want to create some kind of audio or video edited piece. By edited, I mean pulling different communities together. And so in cases like that, where you really think you'll have a need for the actual audio recording or even video recording later, then you have to arrange to have that happen. So it really kind of depends on what you think the use of that information is going to be later.
Well, and I would say, Betty, just to mention, is that you've got to transcribe the recordings, and that's kind of a pain to do. So.
Yeah, that's what I wouldn't do it just for the sake of doing it, because you do have that extra work, and most people don't have a lot of time to go back and listen later. But if you really have a purpose in mind, then it can be really effective.
Thanks, Betty. And then Kathy was wondering, and I do think, despite our reassurances, I know I worry about this kind of thing too. She's basically wondering, how do you handle it when it really seems like the meeting's getting out of control, where, as she puts it, where security is just short of being needed?
Well, I will say, fortunately, that doesn't happen very often, but I think that when the tone setting that you do at the beginning, about saying not only are different points of view going to be tolerated, they're actually going to be welcomed, they're actually necessary. Usually people have relax a bit in that situation, knowing that they're going to have an opportunity to speak. The kind of intervening things you can do to say, well, let's hear a different point of view. Why would somebody have a different perspective than you do? But if you really feel like people are getting volatile or uncivil with each other, I think that that's the time to just step up and say, we're really here tonight to have as constructive a conversation as possible. You might want to revisit the ground rules at that point. You might at that point ask people if they would like to break into smaller groups to have more intimate conversations, so that they can bring that back into the large group. Sometimes I think in large group settings that happens more often because people feel like they kind of have to struggle to be heard, and it's less likely to happen when people are kind of sitting knee to knee and face to face in smaller groups. So you might suggest that as an alternative. It's not an easy situation to handle, but I think a combination or maybe all of those strategies might help lessen the volatility.
Yeah, and I think
I would add something there, Betty, in the sense that if you are anticipating really strong feelings that perhaps the steering team, you've got several members of the, of the organizers there. At a difficult point, calling a break is not a bad idea, and then having someone or several someones approach the people who are struggling and having difficulty, and maybe just walking down the hall with them or walking them outside, letting them know that they're heard, trying to give them some special attention, and then either have them rejoin the group or let them work out some of the emotion that they have, are some things that really have worked for people. But again, being able to anticipate that some of those events might occur will make you feel more confident that that it will continue to be a safe environment.
Great points. All right, Betty, I see we have just 10 minutes left. Shall we jump back into your presentation?
Thanks.
Let me give you control here. All right. Nothing yet, eh? Check one more time here.
There we go. One thing, and I really don't need much time for this because really I just want to show you about some other resources, things that you can actually download. If you look over in your control panel, there's a section that says handouts, and we've put 5 different handouts there that you can download and use for your own purposes in the future. If you have any trouble with the download, you can just jot us an email and we can send them to you electronically. But I just want to at least show you some of the things that are happening in West Virginia and some of the structures that people are creating so that they can have useful dialogue. So you really want to ask yourself, what kind of structure and materials do we need in my particular community? Let's see. Okay, now one process, and I hope some of you will download or request later the handout on World Cafe. World Cafe is such an easy, familiar, friendly, straightforward way to bring people together in conversation. Basically, the basic idea is people are in small groups and they break and circulate throughout the room so that they kind of cross-fertilize each other's groups with ideas. It's a more intimate conversation, but it also feeds into a large group process. So we won't go a lot into that process. That's all in the handout, and as I said, it's very simple, just a 2-page thing. But I want to show you some examples of what people have done with this dialogue process here in West Virginia. I'm not able to click, Sutton. There we go. This was done by some students at Shepherd University. They were concerned about binge drinking on their campus. The idea behind World Cafe is you come up with a set of 3 or maybe even 4, but let's say 3 questions that kind of are progressive and that they lead in a productive way to the goal that you're trying to reach in that discussion. And so in the first round, they asked, what are your concerns about binge drinking? In the second round, what's already being done on our campus? And in the third round, what do we need to know before we can move forward? That's what they wanted to accomplish in this World Cafe that they had on their campus. And they were able to actually pull this together, had it in their on their campus, and form some action teams to start working on some of the issues. It's still not working, Sutton. Okay, this is one that was used at that we did at a Create West Virginia conference. The question was, how can we develop diverse talents in West Virginia? So just with those 3 questions and this process of people working in small groups and moving around the room and cross-fertilizing ideas, they went from what kinds of talents does West Virginia need to what can the local communities do to help people with diverse talents stay and thrive and prosper. All right. And then this one was done down in Huntington. They had the community discussions about safe neighborhoods, and they used World Cafe as a process to move from dialogue into action planning. These 3 questions, just in terms of what themes have emerged, what's doable now, and what requires additional conversation and planning. Jean and I were there, and we saw how effective this was in that community. Now, what I want to do now is just really just show you some other resources that you have, and these are all downloadable. Over in Fayette County, they were very concerned, and as most of our counties are, with substance abuse, and so they actually developed a discussion guide. If you'd like to see the guide that they developed, and we actually also developed a statewide guide on prescription drug abuse, the Fayette County one is downloadable here, and we can send you the other one later. That was okay. This is one that was done in Huntington. We talked about that World Cafe process, building safe and strong neighborhoods in Huntington. And I just thought I'd show you the kind of elegantly simple questions that they used in their communities. What does a safe and strong neighborhood look and feel like to you? What do we have now that helps make our neighborhood a safe and healthy place? What are the challenges we need to address? And if you could change 3 things about your neighborhood, what would they be? And for each of the above ideas, what could be done by individuals, organizations, and so forth? There's a real beauty to those questions, I think. I really admire them because they are very simple. Most people can relate to them, but they also help people get into from the visionary to the very practical in terms of what can we do and who would do it. So I hope you'll download that guide and see if these questions will be useful to you in your work in the future. Some of you have heard of the What's Next West Virginia initiative. This is a statewide initiative. The discussion guide is also there as a download for you. It's basically encouraging people to come together and think about how to improve our communities and build economic well-being and keep West Virginia as a place or create communities where people can thrive. And it's built on some simple structures that I think actually are quite sophisticated when people really dig down deep. Where are we now? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? Those 3 questions, along with a lot of sub-questions, I won't go over all of them, but you can see in the discussion guide, there are pages of questions that a facilitator would use to help people talk about where are we now, where do we want to go, and how do we want to get there. So that's another one. And then I hope some of you will be interested in being part of the statewide initiative that we're developing right now for 2017. The working title is Land of Plenty. How can we assure that West Virginians have the food they need? We know that there are lots of places in West Virginia where people don't have regular access to healthy food. And so we're developing a discussion guide. This is just in draft form, what I have here, and I know you can't read all those tiny words, but I just wanted to show you the structure of the structure that we're using for this discussion is we're looking at different options or different approaches to addressing the problem of food insecurity or food deserts or lack of access in West Virginia. And so this we'll turn this into discussion materials. All of these materials will be free and available for any of you that would like to use them, and we'll be telling you more information as we get that developed. All right. We actually only have about 3 minutes left, so maybe, Sutton, we have time for one closing question before we say goodbye to our friends out there.
Well, of all the ones that came in, I think the only one we didn't get to was Ruby's. She says, is it really so bad for the facilitator to use experience to make a point if the experience can be presented neutrally and really illustrates the sides of the tension?
Ruby, I think the way you express that, in that situation, I think it would be completely appropriate if you can use the experience without showing a bias or a tendency that you have to think a certain way on your point on the issue, and especially if you have a particular experience that does express the tension. I think if you're worried about showing bias with it or by your experience taking away time from other people telling theirs, but I can see time in cases where it could be very strategic to do just what you've said.
Yes, this is Jean. I agree with that. And sometimes when people, when you're in a situation where there's silence and people are struggling with a thoughtful question that you've proposed, you can bring up a problem with your sister or your brother-in-law or something like that, just as a way to help make it comfortable for people to talk about their families as an illustration. So it's just easy as a facilitator to get off telling your own stories and taking up time from the participants.
So that really does take us up to the top of the hour. So I think that there were some interesting points that we could make about the types of issues that people submitted. but that might be, I think that could be well addressed in an email, and we'll send that out to everyone along with some of the resources we mentioned and some other thoughts that occurred to us along the way. But I'll turn it over to Betty.
Mainly, we just want to say thank you to all of you. I love that we have this technology to connect us, but I wish even more that we could be in the same room with each other so that we could see each other and have a longer, more personal conversation. But I'm glad you were able to join us for this today. One of my favorite quotes by Hannah Arendt is, "Democracy needs a place to sit down." And I think that as a facilitator, that's what you're providing for your community, is an opportunity for them to sit down in a constructive, civil environment and talk through the issues that are impacting their lives. So we thank you so much. We hope you'll be in touch with us in a variety of ways. You can email us, you can visit us on our website, on Facebook as well, and just be in touch. You'll be hearing from Sutton. He'll send you some follow-up to this webinar, including a link to where you can find the information that'll be posted, the recording of the webinar, as well as we'll also include any of those downloads in case you didn't get to download them during the webinar. We hope that you'll stay connected with the Center for Civic Life and some of our work going forward, and we appreciate the time that you've spent with us today.
Thanks, everyone.